But I feel like we haven't challenged certain laws, especially laws that are done in bad faith, because we have to understand. I love these people in legislature, in parliament, are bad faith actors. Some of these advisors are bad faith actors. Some of these policies, like the multiple taxes that FCT gives you, if you look at it, you don't even know where the basis is in law. But because you don't want wahala, I'll just pay it. So they will start with the social media bill. When that doesn't come, they say, let's do a content moderation law, because a lot of unholy stuff or immoral stuff is out there online, and so they contemplate the content moderation law. Then when that one doesn't hold water, they will now find a new name for it and say, oh, just want to make sure you all are all together, making sure the internet is safe for everybody. It always starts with them offering you some sort of safety, then they start to threaten you.
Many thanks for being on with us this very lovely day. Welcome to Matters That Truly Matter. In every sense of it, Matters That Matter is the way to go. You think about some of the biggest conversations tagged or moved around in many ways that advocate, that communicate the essence of us being Nigerians. Well, this is the place to find out all about that. I'm glad you joined in. I'm Femi D. Amele. And yes, this conversation is about amplifying conversations around shrinking civic spaces, around food, agriculture, and essentially all the things that have been done by HBS, as one would say. The HBS office, the Abuja office of the Heinrich Böll Foundation, works with activists and thinkers in civic space, business, and politics to stimulate public debate like the one we're about to have now, and action for a socially just and sustainable Nigeria. This conversation is brought to you by HBS in partnership with Fan Radio Co. And yes, you can explore more conversations on the YouTube channel at The Volume Pod. Now, today's episode, the challenges of shrinking civic space in Nigeria as relates to freedom of association, assembly, expression, and of course, gender issues as one would have. And I have two brilliant guests. I can tell you they are brilliant because they bring on the reality around much of this space. Let me start with the introduction of one of our guests, Tsema Yvonne Ede. She's a lawyer with expertise in communications, policy, gender, grant making, and funds management. With 19 years of multi-sectoral experience in developing and implementing integrated programs for government and civil society, her expertise spans public policy development, implementation, public safety and human security management, women's peace and security, design and implementation of human rights protection and mechanisms. Among many things that she currently does, she's worked with government organizations and as well as non-government organizations. A significant achievement, of course, is been the fact that she has worked for the launch of the Heinrich Böll Foundation's Green Academy, a competence building hub for equipping young leaders and activists in Nigeria. She, alongside with many things she has done, and this is me just editing and reading her profile in the most minute way, and you know that sometimes when you listen to people, you know there's more to this person than just what one could read. But she has covered a lot of ground, working with the likes of HBS, Global Rights, MacArthur Foundation, Luminate Group, Ford Foundation. She advises donors. You can imagine how important that is. If you can advise a donor, and you that are also a receiver, you need advice from Tsema from time to time to get it right. And she's here with us today. She's a lawyer. She is an alumnus of University of Oxford as well. Thank you, Tsema.
Thank you for having me, Femi.
I can continue actually reading your profile.
Please stop.
And I'm just trying to behave myself, but not really too much. Also, a guest today is Oyebisi Babatunde Oluseyi, Executive Director of the Nigerian Network of NGOs, NNNGOs. First time I had to pronounce this acronym, I thought I was missing an N. It's like I overcompensated or undercompensated. But that's what works when you think about a network of NGOs that he leads, which is about 4,000 plus of them across the country and around Africa. He has a rich background in civil society strengthening, including his tenure at UNICEF New York, where he initiated the Rural Voices of Youth Initiative. Oyebisi has significantly expanded the NNNGO's reach and impact, including delivering the non-profit management masterclass for Google.com. His expertise spans across legal reforms, benefiting non-profits in Nigeria to global engagements, among many other things. He's a co-chair of the Forus Task Force on the Summit of the Future, with multiple leadership roles across civil society platforms. serving on the board of the International Center for Not-for-Profit Law, is also on the executive committee of the civil society pillar of the Committee of Democracies, among many other boards in which he is on. And I'm sure he would highlight some of his experience and some of the places he's worked extensively as we go on. Thank you both for taking our time to be here today.
So good to be here.
Oh, yes. Okay, so let me start with the question I obviously have not asked any of my guests in a while. How are you today?
Thank you for asking that. Overwhelming, tired, but thank God it's Friday.
Yes. And you know one interesting thing about both of you, and Tsema, I will start with you. 19 years of experience, and yours maybe up to 35 years of experience.
No, not yet. I'm not that old. I've got about over 2 decades, 21 going to 22.
So that tells me that close to 2 decades of observation, also being in action in civil society space, you've seen a span of action in many ways. Sometimes
Absolutely.
it shrinks, sometimes it stretches, sometimes it's name it. Mm-hmm. Let me ask, what's your observation of the landscape in the year 2025? Let me start with Tsema.
So that's a good question, and very interesting question that will make me think. The way it's coming along is quite complicated and interesting. It's complicated in the sense that we've always talked about collaboration within the space, but I don't think we truly understand what it means to collaborate. And I've worked in the grant making space for a pretty long time, and a lot of times donors and grant makers always say, collaborate. That's how we give you money. If you collaborate, you work together, because donors have this spectacular idea of what collaboration will look like. It makes sense. More people go further as opposed to going faster. You go further together. Mm-hmm. But we find that collaboration is hard when you do not share values with certain people who do certain things. And that's an honest truth we have to tell ourselves. If we're all in the media space, and I speak to media because I've worked a lot with journalists and protecting free expression, and we're all in the media space, yes, and we're all supposed to be journalists, and you say, oh, work together, let's protect the space, let's ensure freedom of expression. Well, you find that not all journalists are working together. There are some journalists that will be co-opted into ensuring that whatever you're advocating for per free expression is jeopardized or sabotaged, and they will certainly do it. But you miss it because you think we're all journalists, so we all have an interest, free expression. But we do not understand that we also have to have shared values when it comes to what freedom of expression is. And why do I say this? Take, for instance, an Arise, a Channels, a TVC. They tell their news very differently. They tell news, they do good work, they have spectacular staff. But they tell their news differently. Do you have shared values with them? Does Premium Times and an online entity like maybe People's Gazette or the cable news, do they have the same values? And so if they don't have the same values, will they propagate freedom of expression the same way? Maybe not. And so we have to understand that when we're advocating for collaboration, and understand that there is an element of co-optation and fragmentation that we are susceptible to. And if we understand that, we need to find ways that we can collaborate, and that will be in us finding shared values. And our shared values might be like, if you shut me up today, they'll shut you up tomorrow. How do you ensure that we all ensure that our voices are heard, our voices are not silenced? Those are the kind of values we can find. But if you say, oh, we're trying to fight a government, we're trying to fight this, you might not find people coming on your side. So that's what I'm trying to say here is, what are the underlying values? Is human rights, is expression, is speech, is free press. How do you ensure that we hold ourselves together on those values as opposed to looking for other things that we think connect us, like the fact that we're all media entities?
And she makes a very brilliant point around this. And I know that over the years, the landscape has changed, and you have observed front hand how some of these NGOs started, stopped, some silent, some say, I'm not doing it again. All kinds of things have happened to non-governmental organizations, either because the landscape they find themselves is tougher than they would imagine. Your take on this, on that?
I think on that, you want to particularly think about the non-profit life cycle. There's the startup phase, the growth phase, the stagnation phase, the phase where you have disruptions, and the phase where you die permanently or you rejuvenate. So when you look at that life cycle, it's typically in the batches of 5 to 10 years. So you would have noticed that maybe NGOs that were in existence some 30 years ago, they're no longer in existence because of the sustainability conversation. Or maybe because, whatever issue they are working on, they felt they've been able to achieve that. There are a lot of makes. There's also the enabling environment for them to be able to do that as well. And particularly focusing on enabling environment, it would mean that there's ease of registration, there's ease of compliance, civil society is a contested space, meaning that if you don't have the muscle to compete, you can't, stay vibrant. Because we're asking the same pool of stakeholders for resources, the public, the multilaterals, the private sector. There's some level of competition. So you must bring to the marketplace a product which will be your vision and mission and the issues that you're trying to solve. But in solving all of that, how do we ensure that laws helps you to do that effectively? Whether you're doing it in a small way or whether you're scaling, all right? Depending whatever it is, the trend is that organizations would continue to struggle. And those that are not struggling at this time would have meant that they've done some things well with their corporate governance, thinking about their sustainability, thinking about their strategy, understanding where they need to work, collaborating, even though collaboration can be difficult.
Yeah.
Again, the ethics of doing the work as well, self-regulating and also complying with statutory regulations. But by and large, zooming back into civic space conversations, and I always like to give the definition so that we're clear on what we're discussing. Civic space would be the laws, policies, regulations, sometimes directives or orders that helps us to be able to claim our rights. Rights meaning freedom of expression, ability to be able to speak, criticize government, provide feedback to government, even to private sector, to civil society. Assembly, your ability to be able to protest, particularly to express your feelings and your emotions. All right. Then association, your ability to come together, form a non-profit, an association, a union, even a political party. All right. So how are laws enabling us to be able to do that? That is what we mean by civic space. So in instances where laws are not helping us to claim those rights, then we would say that is shrinking. Of course, there's a new school of thought that says, is it actually shrinking or it is being threatened? And I'll let Tsema, take on that scholarly thinking,
She's almost the dean of the school of the thought.
Absolutely. I mean, she is from yesterday's space.
Yeah.
She is the dean of that thought to say, are we using the right nomenclature? Is it shrinking or is it being threatened? Whatever the nomenclature. Wahala day.
Yes, I agree with you on that. And when you do say shrinking, and just a few hours ago, we were having this conversation before we did come on to record, and you were telling me about the number of podcasters, I beg to say, the number of NGOs that are registered in Nigeria, 197,000.
Yes, and that includes religious non-profits as well, churches, mosques, and shrines where applicable.
And of course, that means they do things that, that are not exactly government rules, which is non-government.
Absolutely.
In every right of it. It tells me that if the numbers are growing, probably the effectiveness should be growing. So in theory, when people say, the numbers of the NGOs that are being registered is growing, shouldn't that also mean, for example, that they are being more effective? There is a more widespread of, you can't say it's shrinking when the numbers is growing. You cannot say somebody that has 10 children is now family planning time, that kind of thing. I mean, that's something that one wonders about. Somebody who has 10 children, someone will say, you can't threaten this one with whether male or female child that is expecting.
Yeah.
That's the perspective.
Well, let's talk about NGO per capita.
Yeah. Okay.
Because 197 non-profits to 233 million Nigerians.
Okay.
Is it growing? No. Because it means
Should
that
it be more people?
if you do the calculations, 233 million Nigerians, that's unofficial
That's about
data.
1% of NGOs
You're looking at one NGO servicing maybe over 2 million.
That's on paper at least, but 197 is the registered ones.
The 997 is the registered one, using a assumed population number of say 200 million. Let's be how do I put the English?
Yeah, but another thing that I think
so we don't have many NGOs. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Not enough even
to
now.
service the amount of problem that we have.
And Tsema, let me get to you on this because we've looked. I mean, that analogy tells me that even though the number sounds plenty, it's not as much as it is in reality.
Yeah.
But then we also now have the whole concept of freedom of association and freedom of every of the freedom that the right grants you is for you to be able to have a voice that may be different from the other people's voices. And you mentioned that earlier. And shrinking or threat can also be within. looks like, and I was telling Oyebisi earlier that one of the challenges I also see is the fact that there are NGOs now being registered that are supposedly opposition voices, or they have that inclination towards paymasters who kick against what regular NGOs that you and I may know normally would do. How does one mitigate that? Because those are actors that also cause the space to be confused.
Okay, I'm going to say something, and it's going to be a bit controversial, but I want us to be very practical about this.
Please do.
And so what I want to say is, we just said that everybody has a right to associate, assemble, and express themselves, which means that opposition have a right to bring whoever they want to bring into. Like, what makes you think that you're the good guy and so the other guy is the bad guy?
Absolutely. Okay.
What makes you think that you are the one who is doing the great work and the other guy is doing the bad work? In freedom of expression and freedom of association, it's also a free marketplace, for want of a better word, for us to exchange ideas, go back and forth on these things, and sit down. That is the whole idea of the space. The fact that the opposition can register an NGO, the other party can register an NGO, whatever that may look like, and we have interesting conversations, interesting back and forth. Another thing we need to understand is, and I don't think we really explored that space well enough, we need to understand is we are not meant to replace government. A lot of times, a lot of our NGOs are replacing government's work. We're meant to, where we can, hold government accountable.
Give an example of
Okay,
that.
so this is a good example. Personally, we have a lot of churches that build hospitals, build churches, build schools and everything, which is amazing. But you find that a lot of people cannot afford, like, the great Catholic schools. I can't afford to take my children to Loyola Jesuit. But, I can't afford to take my children to certain kinds of hospitals that are run by certain private entities as opposed to a government hospital. But we forget that while we have this charitable cause and why we do this, like, my child went to get the Hep C vaccine in Mary Stopes, which is supposed to be discountable. It was very expensive. But if you go to MPHCDA, the Hep C vaccine is free. The hepatitis vaccine, the HPV rather, the HPV vaccine is free to an extent. But we paid 30,000 for 3 shots, so 30,000 or 28 or thereabouts. I don't want to be quoted wrongly, but it was tens of thousands. And we realized that in replacing government, because government can't give us these facilities, it's costing us more. But we're not engaging citizens enough to say that these are what your rights look like. We're too busy trying to contest that space it's talking about, and we've not taken ownership of certain spaces. From where I'm standing, and I stand to be corrected. And so we're not holding them accountable to say, look, it's not my job to constantly provide healthcare and schools for you. It's my job to tell you who you should demand healthcare and schools from. So if we go to these communities and we're demanding for good governance, we're demanding for people to go out and get your votes, tell them this is what your vote looks like. This is the power of your vote. We don't do that. Instead, we're looking for where we can get what we can get out of certain things. Contested space, I completely and totally agree with you. Sustainability of it's not so great because everybody's looking for what to get out of it. But I will really say from the bottom of my heart, is because we think that a lot of times, especially with this fight that they fight, they like the broken system. A lot of NGOs like the broken system. If we're honest, even doing a regular profit business is hard in Nigeria.
Yes.
Ease of business is not so easy. Like, a private owned business owners are being taxed. In the FCT, there are like 5 different kinds of taxes that come to people who have shops. Then they have different kinds of bills that come to them. So it goes both ways for the private sector and for the non-profit sector. But we're not holding government accountable for the things that they need to do, because we both think that we need to be fighting each other. And that's where the co-optation and the fragmentation comes in. And so when I say civil society is trying too hard to replace government, and that's why we're struggling, is because we've forgotten what our role is in holding government accountable to make things better. And to your point, it really contains even all the Ekanka, Grail, Guru Maharaji, they all fall under NGO, right? And so
Class C registration.
Yes, and it's all philanthropy they do. They give you food for today, what happens tomorrow? But do we have systems that ensure that we don't have a food security problem in Nigeria? Do we have systems that ensure that we have a good transport system in Nigeria? I don't think that we are really truly grasping what we need to do with NGOs is empower the Girl Child Foundation, which is good, but Empower the Girl Child Foundation just wants to distribute pads. And when they don't have pads, what do? They sit down and they go somewhere else to look for money to distribute pads. But a girl goes through a monthly cycle every month. That's why it's called a monthly cycle, right? So if she's having a monthly cycle every month, do you have the production power to provide millions of girls with pads every month? Why not work on systems that make pads affordable? So I'm trying hard not to digress here, but I think what I want us to see is the bigger picture, that it's not us contesting the space that is the problem. It's us. We're too busy contesting and fighting each other that we're not looking at government and how we can hold government and certain state actors more responsible. I don't want to use the word accountable, but hold them to be more responsible for the things we've given them custody of.
And Oyebisi, okay, you want
Yeah,
to
maybe some thoughts as to that, and I like the way you framed it, but allow me to frame it more differently. It's to say that there's a role for everyone,
Yes.
both those that want to deliver services in ways that
Sure.
supports government, and also a role for those who really would like to advocate and say, hey, get the system right. We can't continue to do all of this. And there's a role for those who would say, having looked at all of this, let's track how resources is being used.
Very
Right? So there's a role for everybody. And that's why it's a democracy. And I'd always like to cite that example of 133 million Nigerians that are poor. Government is not able to do it alone. So you need a whole of sector approach. Private sector coming in to do its bit. Government doing its bit. Citizens doing their own bit. And non-profits also come in, charitable support. All right. And where they need to also advocate and bring about government policies, they bring that, to bear. But what we're saying is that if I decide to support government in terms of services, the law has to enable me to do that.
Yeah, I agree.
If I decide to say, government, the way I can only support you, is to tell you what is bad and not what is good.
I can receive that.
The law must allow me to do that. If I say, now to do naira and kobo, for me to ensure that people can do this and have decent living, the law must enable me to do that.
But the law enables a lot of activities for the NGOs. But in real life, in the law, much of the law is in the law. It stays in the law. But
Absolutely.
in real life, it's a little bit different. Thinking about NGOs that have to attend to communities, for example. And let's take on the dynamic of the Northeast or Northwest, for example, where the categorization, the local registration, the verification and regulation, right? There's a regulation for freedom of association. There's
Absolutely.
a regulation for
Absolutely.
almost freedom of provision, if I would say that. And I know there's nothing like freedom of provision. But the dynamics there is completely different. And one of the biggest things the government often says about that is that if we don't monitor and know who is bringing what, some NGOs are funding terrorism. And that's the claim.
So the context for that environment is different, all right? And we must understand all of the concerns that may come from any stakeholder, all right? Which is, if you say NGOs may be used as conduits for terrorism financing, it's a may. You have to evidence that with data, okay? That NGOs are also not delivering XYZ. You also have to evidence it with data. But the peculiar nature of that region is that we have to work together through a whole of sector approach, meaning that don't forget that non-profits or community-based organizations in that region, they are the first responders. They are the first to know that, hey, their kidnapping is happening. They are the first to raise the alarm. How do you enable them with laws to be able to do that? They are the first to also provide shelter. Okay, so if you now accuse them of being the ones funding terrorism, then it means that when that happens, they just fold their hands and they are looking. Whereas before NEMA, SEMA, FEMA, anybody comes, they have started some level of work. Now, the conversation around terrorism financing is real. And that's why you have the Financial Action Task Force saying that we agree that we need to fight terrorism financing. But whatever law that you are going to bring, whatever activities you're going to do, make sure it does not affect the legitimate activities of these non-profits. All right. We've had a lot of misinformation and disinformation around non-profits and terrorism financing. And the questions have always been, show us evidence of how traditional NGOs are supporting terrorism financing. We've not been able to see those evidence. But laws in Nigeria are now more better. In fact, across the 54 African countries, Nigeria has the most progressive terrorism financing law. And these are moments of advocacy and also collaboration between government and civil society in being able to reform those laws, such that today when you check the FATF list, Nigeria is on FATF recommendation 8, which is the recommendation that sort of regulates the non-profit sector, Nigeria is largely compliant, meaning that we're good. Okay. But then in terms of implementation, all right, we still need other regulators to understand what this means. We need political leaders not to use the high profile of non-profits against them. Okay. While some of their activities may look like it is supporting terrorism financing, it is not. Because there's a principle within humanitarian action that they call, I can't remember what the name of the principle, but what it says is nobody should die. Whether the person is a thief or whatever, as long as you're a medical personnel, you must treat them. It's the right to life kind of thing. So if I now see a terrorist, I'm a doctor providing response in that region, and I treat that person, you then say I'm supporting terrorism. No, it's a right to life kind of thing. It's a UN mechanism and process for humanitarian action. Interpreting that to me supporting terrorism financing is not right. And I think that is where we keep having some level of misconception as to those that have come out publicly to say NGOs are supporting terrorism finance.
And I'll still go back to some of the state laws, NNNGO, Abia, NNNGO, Kano, Borno. They have some dynamic laws about local registration. But I wanted to get Tsema's viewpoint on some of the laws that we're dealing with. In recent times, I mean, the National Assembly has been going back and forth, trying to calibrate and find the right words that will make it land easy when it comes to, oh, we want to regulate you guys, you have to provide us with this, provide us with that. And I think twice now. This is the second coming. The first coming was total, it was a standoff, complete one. The second coming is that we are repackaging it in a way that is more, and I think some NGO people are helping them, repackaging it in such a way that is more that kind of something. It tells you about how the government also wants to regulate at the level using the National Assembly. And you're a lawyer, I know that for sure. What's your thinking? Because some say that it didn't work with social media like that. Then let's try it with the NGOs like that. What's your thoughts on that?
Okay, I will say this first, that anything that is anti the Constitution is null and void. We know that the federal Constitution already provides the basics for law and the basic for human rights in Nigeria, and it's been interpreted broadly and interpreted in so many ways to accommodate human rights protection. What I do know is it's not peculiar to Nigeria. These all gagging and finding ways to censor people, finding ways to monitor people, digital rights threats, and everything. It's not peculiar to us in Nigeria. It's happening across the region. It's even happening in the US. The US now are starting to drop seeds of hate speech. They want to regulate speech, so they're starting with hate speech. When you say hate speech long enough, you start to regulate free expression, and you do that. So they're bad faith actors, and that's what I also wanted to respond to some things that he had said, is that a lot of times, I don't know if it is our laws that disallow us to run free in our country when it comes to NGOs and the work that we do. When you say the laws are shrinking us, the laws are choking us, I believe that anything that is outside of, and you can correct me if I'm not wrong, and I can understand that I have a privilege that I'm speaking from, and I've worked in grant making for too long. So the way donors look at things is different. I acknowledge that. But I will say that when you say the laws must allow you operate, the laws must allow you operate, I hear you there, but I feel like we haven't challenged certain laws, especially laws that are done in bad faith, because we have to understand, I love these people in legislature, in parliament, are bad faith actors. Some of these advisors are bad faith actors. Some of these policies, like the multiple taxes that FCT gives you, if you look at it, you don't even know where the basis is in law. But because you don't want wahala, I'll just pay it. So they will start with the social media bill. When that doesn't come, they say, let's do a content moderation law, because a lot of unholy stuff or immoral stuff is out there online, and so they contemplate the content moderation law. Then when that one doesn't hold water, they will now find a new name for it and say, just want to make sure you all are all together, making sure the internet is safe for everybody. It always starts with them offering you some sort of safety, then they start to threaten you. But the Constitution is clear, and I will say something, when it comes to human rights, we have to be honest enough to say with ourselves, to say that if we want to follow the Constitution and freedom of expression, we have to follow it wholly, which means that there are people that may say things we may not like. And we have to be comfortable enough to stay with those people that will say things that we don't like. But also have the information to counter their own information. And so when you talk about the misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, and all that information that's now been wrapped into fake news and it's been wrapped into all of that, how do we push back on that? Fact checking, right?
Yes.
How do we push back on the NGOs are doing this and NGOs are not doing that? Fact checking. We put our own news out there, but we have to go all in, or we can't be partially in and partially out. Understand that we already have a constitution. Can the basis of our arguments be what the constitution provides for? If that's the basis of our argument, are you going to be okay with when we say no content moderation law? That means that some people might post things that we're uncomfortable with online. How are you going to deal with that? You understand? It's very simple. The law, when it comes to freedom of expression, says that you can express yourselves, but there are 3 reasons. You have to be, because we have the legitimacy, proportionality, and necessity clause. But it also goes on to say that if the ICCPR, which is where our own constitution comes from, states that everyone has a right to express themselves, but the only reason where your rights will be derogated upon a little bit is where it protects the rights and reputation of others, public order, public health,
and
national security. And so bad faith actors have used national security. Now we have the Official Secrets Act of 1962 that they want to give a new name and bring back. We now have so many things.
Decree 2 also repackaged somehow. 1984 Decree 2.
They always find ways, and so we have to push back on it because the constitution is clear. What does national security say? It has to be whatever law you are bringing has to be legitimate. It has to be proportional to whatever it is they are pushing back against. It has to be necessary for those times. And so do we have the mental capacity and the mental temerity to push back on human rights threats and have these conversations before they blow up? Maybe not, because we always look for interest, and that is the cooptation and fragmentation that sometimes comes to play here. And I feel like I want to end this segment saying that we're not having enough conversations, even as CSOs. Because if we say, okay, we want to regulate NGOs, NGOs need regulation too. Some of them are doing something, some of them really do siphon money. And people are pushing back, but they don't understand that those ones that are siphoning money, there's a way you can hold them accountable under the law. So you can't say because NGOs, if few NGOs are siphoning money, regulate all NGOs. And so those are the kind of things I think we need to do, as opposed to us versus them. Understand that there are bad faith actors in government and there are bad faith actors in the NGO space. But ultimately, what we need to protect are human rights.
Yeah.
And that's how I think that we can start from.
And let me take Oyebisi up on human rights. The NNNGO, I've been waiting to say that. The NNNGO.
You can say triple NGO.
Triple NGO, okay. The organization you lead as the executive director also collaborates with the NHRC, which is the Human Rights Commission. And there's a lot of efforts to capture, right, and to communicate the issues that are going on with NGOs and some of the big places. How is that going, and what does that mean for people who are following through?
Yes, don't forget that the work of the NGO legally, of the National Human Rights Commission legally, is to protect and promote rights. And all we've been discussing since morning is around association, assembly, and expression. If you followed the National Human Rights Commission's work, you notice that they've issued advisories on expression and also on assembly as well. And now we're working with them on an advisory on freedom of association that helps governments and regulators understand how best to really allow citizens to claim those rights relating to freedom of association. That is at the draft form. We have an advisory now that is at the draft form. And we're hoping that as soon as it goes through the NHRC's systems, it becomes issued as well. The beauty of that advisory is that institutions in government or in governance can then take that up and use it in their implementation of either laws, policies, or regulations that can allow us as citizens to claim those rights relating to starting, running a non-profit, or even accessing resources, as it were.
And it's interesting. This is me now getting to the national dashboard. I'm coming back to you, Tsema, but Oyebisi and his team, you work on something called the national dashboard, right?
Yes.
That allows tracking. I mean, it's a lot. You have gone through it, and I'm still trying to understand the many other things it could imply or what it means. Share with us a little bit about the national dashboard.
So what we're doing with the dashboard is actually bringing some science to human rights commitments that Nigeria may have made and the ones that they are committed to at the level of the United Nations Human Rights Council, all countries that are members of the United Nations report on their human rights commitments every 3 to 4 years. So what we've done is to look at those commitments that the Nigerian government have already agreed to, and to say we will track the implementation of all of these. So we've created that dashboard, and that dashboard is the repository where you have information about progress that we're seeing, and also where there are gaps, so that in the next 3 to 4 years, when the Nigerian government will be reporting, they can actually go to that dashboard themselves and be able to pick progress to report. And where they also want to be honest about gaps, they can pick it there. But for us as non-profits, we can also use it as an advocacy tool when we go to Geneva to say, okay, this is what our government is doing in terms of human rights. So that's the role of that dashboard. You want to be able to go there to track what is changing, what hasn't changed. If your interest is in understanding the landscape of rights in the country. And why are we particularly talking about rights is because that is a kind of ecosystem that allows democracy to be able to function effectively. And that might also make me piggyback on what Tsema may have said around the beauty of democracy is the diversity of opinion.
Oh, and by the way, the national dashboard that we just talked about, I understand the HBS is supporting that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're using HBS resources to be able to do that. And one must thank HBS for allowing, providing us resources to do this. Why is because each time, and this is across Africa, each time government wants to report on things, it's always a struggle. Even if civil society would want to do it, it's always a struggle to be able to capture what may have happened or what may not have happened if you're not tracking systematically. So the investment from HBS is helping us to track systematically Nigerian government's commitment to implementing their human rights commitments. Also, not forgetting that there's a committee within the Office of the Attorney General that is already tasked with that role of doing this. But where our work is augmenting or supporting that, but more importantly, providing information both to the general public and also to non-profits that are interested in tracking what is happening at that level. Yes, so that's HBS resources. Particularly also mentioning that we've also used HBS resources in being able to, address some challenges with laws at the subnational level, either in Kano, NNNGO, or in Lagos State, where we've done some work as well. And yeah, we're grateful to them for that.
It's interesting you do bring that up. I was going to talk about some of those peculiar situations with some states, and the dynamic laws. It's one thing to go of national laws, and then Tsema and I will probably say, this law, that law. But there are laws that it's almost difficult to know that it was there at the state level. I was reading up on preparing for this. I heard about Decree 7, something about that in Enugu State, or thereabout, where they have that going on. I was like, okay, how old is Decree 7? Because even for the fact that the word decree was used in front of it, tells you that it is not in
it was in the military era.
Military era. Is it okay? Is it all right to borrow from...
Intellectual laziness is what it is.
Oh, not necessarily. Maybe because
I will say it's intellectual laziness. Now, this is why I say it's intellectual. And Oyebisi, you can disagree with me if you want. But I will say it's intellectual laziness, because there's no way you will take, in a democracy, you take a military time rule, you don't review what the rule is about. Some words and even some of the penalties are as old as those times. Like some of the penalties are nothing compared to these times, whether it is penal, whether it is monetary or otherwise. I beg your pardon. So it's intellectual laziness as far as I'm concerned, because you just don't want to do the homework. You want to punish people. Again, bad faith actors want to punish people. They need something that helps them exert power and helps them exert authority, because they don't want to be held accountable where necessary. And so they bring in these stupid laws. Can
they even rely on those laws? I mean,
if it was never
because
repealed,
that's the only existing that's the only existing law at that time.
If it was never repealed, if they never said this rule no longer exists, this is no longer existing, it hangs over your head. I think El-Rufai used a lot of vexatious laws in those times to bully journalists in Kaduna State. A lot of laws that we didn't even know. I think that's how, what's that guy's name? Is it Mekori? The one that when he was done, I think it was Audu Mekori, just went up.
Audu Mekori, that was the music executive.
Yeah, no, was it Audu or his brother?
Okay.
I think there was one of them that was really bullied by him. At the end of the guy is like, I'm not doing this anymore, and he drops his pen and he's no longer engaged. You don't hear his voice when it comes to human rights and accountability anymore. I'm not sure which one it is, but I know it was an archaic law that was used against me, and I can be fact check. You can fact check me when you are doing this. But there's something to that effect. It's that they are bad faith actors that use them. Intellectual laziness, even on the part of NGOs, because we already have courts that can repeal such judgments and such laws and say, no, that law doesn't exist in these times. It is repugnant to our natural justice. It is contrary to our constitution. But lawyers are lazy. I don't want to call them lazy.
Some.
Maybe they don't have the funding.
Would you say
No, it's not lazy. It's funding. A lot of times it's funding. Luckily, we have some non-profits that support journalists and support lawyers to be able to push back on some of these laws. And the way you can repeal such laws is either you get National Assembly to repeal them or State Assembly to repeal them, or you go to the courts and the courts pronounce them as unconstitutional.
Maybe we'll frame it differently, and rather than
he has a way of saying frame it differently and say something.
Is daddy of all NGOs.
I think it's about the interest.
Okay.
I mean, you must have an interest in a policy for you to go through the long haul of reforming it. So I won't put it at the table of intellectual laziness. I would say probably, interest, on the part of all critical stakeholders may not have happened at the time it needed to happen. But when we picked it up as a Nigerian network of NGOs, all right, we were able to bring enough stakeholders to the table to say, hey, look here, this is a decree.
That's intellectual laziness when stakeholders are not even interested until you bring them, because you've used the magic word stakeholders. That means they should have a stake in it.
Yeah.
But they are not aware of it because they are not interested in it, and that's the laziness. So how can you call them? How can you say they have interest? They don't have interest, but they are stakeholders. Like, it's a bit contrary. Like, how can you be a stakeholder without an interest?
Well, I see your sense that if you're a stakeholder, you must track laws that affect your work.
Yes.
And be very much interested in reviewing them. I perfectly agree with you. And that's the era that we're in now, where you're looking at regulations for my work. How does it affect me? Which sections need to be repealed? Which sections need to be reformed? And all of that. So we're here. It's a journey. All right. Intellectual laziness. Interest. We are here.
It is interesting when we talk about that. And I still want to know, I think about the story of somebody who is running an NGO at a local level, is behind bars, right, in police custody. Even the police can't tell him what he has done, but he has broken a law, one way or the other. And you start to think about, how do you get them out, of being behind bars? And there's this sense of, if nobody even knows you are behind bars, how does anybody get you out? If you're in Abuja, maybe clans of WhatsApp group will say, somebody have carried my brother who tweeted this or who wrote this. But if you're in a remote community, right, outrightly remote, where you've carried 2 bars of yam to go and do something, and they say you did not see the right people before distributing those yams, it's a whole new ball game. And I wonder, how do we track some of those human rights issues?
I think, just to situate the conversation, if you're doing your work as a non-profit practitioner, cases of you being arrested are a bit uncommon as a NGO practitioner.
That's the ones who do service delivery.
Who do service delivery and all of that. Again, just to disaggregate so that we begin to know. If you're very critical of government, if you're not doing service delivery, and you're now in the field of advocacy, accountability, activism, and all of that, part of your risk, all right, is being actually ruffled and threatened and arrested or incarcerated. We see that a lot. And why am I putting that out there is because some people might come out and say, no, I can't, you can't arrest an NGO person. All right.
It sounds awkward.
It sounds awkward because you will think that, but depending on the thematic area, all right, whatever thematic area you work in, there are risks. But for some, the risk is higher, particularly when you're doing rights-based issues, or you're dealing with environment, or you're dealing with issues around land grabbing, or you're dealing with issues around accountability, budget tracking, and all.
Or mining as well.
You're spoiling somebody's business. Absolutely. So you find more of attacks happening there. Or even if you're a citizens blogger, okay, So that's the science we're bringing to the conversation now. So you find that happening. And that is happening a lot at the subnational level. Okay. And, before you know, we belong to a rapid response group where every time this person has been arrested, that person has been, and you're dealing with that, distracting you even from your day-to-day work. Okay. But we're saying that whoever may have spotlighted an issue is not your enemy. Someone said to me recently that feedback is a gift, and I think I agree as a leader. So if I come to you and say, in this sector, there are bad actors there, then you allow the institution of government to be used against me for saying, hey, pay attention here so that our commonwealth is not misused. It's not a society where you are respecting the right for me to express. Because you have said, see something, say something. I have sent something, I have said something, I am where I shouldn't be. How do we solve the issue of corruption? No one of us would point to ourselves and say, I am corrupt. We are all saints. But why is it that we have problems of corruption? There will be someone that wants to say something. But if the law is not enabling the person to say something, if institutions and governance are not allowing that person to say something, then we would all just keep quiet and let the thing spoil.
Let me allow Tsema to say something on this. This issue of rapid response, there's the urban version, there's the rural people version, the community. But I see you a lot in the space where we are quite a number of groups where we have to make rapid response for, even when it's unclear why the person is behind custody, there's some sort of mobilization to create response. But we often see that happens it has to be brought, for example, to a WhatsApp group. It has to be brought to a network of, we are here together, and the people in that group, the quality of that
solidarity.
The quality of the people on that group will help determine maybe how fast you get out of where you are. But if you are not in a group, or somebody who brings your matter to that group, or nobody brings your matter to that group, you're in all trouble. But you've seen it all, and the part I'm even going to get at is sometimes it takes certain amount of resources, funding, if I would say, to put out statements, get a lawyer, or to get some resources to get the person from behind bars. Rapid response is not so less costly, I would say.
Yeah, I hear you clearly on that one. But I think that there is only so much we can do without money. And it's how we explore those things that we can do without money. Because I think, to your point, Femidi, you find that because of those concerns about we probably need money to mobilize at some point, it holds us back from getting stuff done. But to Oyebisi's point, and to what you had said earlier, there are people at the subnationals who are doing amazing work and are still able to resist or withstand the tide. Quite difficult circumstances, but it's doable. I will start with partnerships are important, and partnerships with people with shared values, because we've also been in some of these groups where when we're trying to advocate for certain people, some other people in the group will be like, what did you do? And the question is, get him out first before you ask what did he do. His life is being threatened, get him out first. Then I say, what did he do? Maybe he did something, And so that back and forth is wasting time because you're asking what did he do. But I think ultimately you have to find people who have shared values with you, and we hone in on our strengths. I honestly feel, and I know you people will say it's my privilege speaking, and I acknowledge it, but I honestly feel like there are some things that can be done without money. If we have, and I'm not talking about using your staff or using manpower, but I'm talking about just even using your partnerships. Make a call to somebody because your network has allowed you meet a certain group of people. Oh, I heard there's a threat going on in Kogi State. Oh, I know an NGO working in Kogi State. Let me call someone and see what they can do. And they don't need transport. Maybe it's just a walking stance. I don't know. I'm not trying to say. But I feel like a lot of these advocacy sometimes with social media, it's now easy. You put it up online. But then the question is, if it's online, does it translate into something that can happen in the grassroots? Yes. I have a friend in Benue State were in the same community, a fellowship, and I don't mean a Christian fellowship, I mean like a social impact fellowship, whose brother was recently tortured and killed, allegedly tortured and killed by army officials. And he was talking, nobody listened. It was at the grassroots in Makurdi, like down in the village in Benue State. And what did he do? He just leveraged on social media, got the community, got the youth, took pictures of the brother, posted and said, my brother was tortured and killed. And they said, how do you know he was tortured? Army officers took him, they tortured him, and they killed him. And they made noise about it. And the army called him to have a conversation. And there was a hashtag, I made a few calls here and there, called a few journalists and said to them, please, can you just tell this person's story? Just tell this person's story. It didn't cost me anything. It didn't cost him anything. And they just told the story like that. I do understand that platform where that story was told probably cost money. But that's where our other partnerships happen. We have the big money. Our big money does the small work, which is why sometimes, even in Nigeria, to become a senior advocate, you have to do some pro bono work because you're making big money in those big jobs, like you're getting all that stuff. So do some pro bono work and help people in low-income communities, and that's if we look at it that way, like some pro bono work to do and do some big money work, then I think that helps. But I also understand, and I'll end with this, I also understand that donors sometimes give money and they're very strict with what they want their money to go into. So that also affects the way we can even do impact and the way we can intervene or jump into rapid response. So we also have to be creative in how we engage with donors on what we want to do when it comes to that kind of funding. Something for us to think about, maybe questions for us to ask ourselves, and probably go back to the drawing board to see how we can navigate all of that. But I will say that we should not use money as a reason not to do our interventions. Rather, find partners with shared values and see how we can leverage on all our strengths to do the kind of impacts we want to.
Okay. We have to round off, so I'll just allow you run for about 30 seconds, to conclude your thoughts, and of course, Tsema would follow through as well.
Yeah, I think for me is that we need to get to a stage where we don't need a rapid response, where institutions and governance can do their work. Of course, there's a legal aid council who should be able to pick up issues like this. There's the National Human Rights Commission, an independent agency of government that should be strengthened and properly resourced to be able to do this. Within the police architecture itself, there should be human rights desks. And I'm glad that, there were conversations where I heard that the IGP is already thinking about something like that. We need these systems to work so that I don't have to have a rapid response because my colleagues have been arrested for doing what typically you have said they should do. All right. You've said that, okay, Constitution, you can tell me I am wrong as long as you are not violent, as long as you are not spoiling my name, as long as you are not doing this against the country in terms of national security, as long as it's not affecting people's health, as long as it is in order. And I've done everything within that. Why, again, is the state not allowing me to enjoy this? That is the basis of this.
I do hear you. Well, Tsema, your thoughts?
My final thoughts is democracy is only as strong as its institutions. And if we continue to have weak institutions, we'll have a weak democracy. If we have a weak police force, if we have a weak judiciary, if we have a weak legislature, and weakness comes from even the weakest, bad faith actors. And so another question for us to end with is how do we strengthen our institutions to translate into better democratic practices? Something for us to think about, because I don't have the answers.
I agree with you. Well, I'm looking forward to the answers you will provide as we go on, as these ideas continue to go in. But if you've watched this through, I'm sure you have exciting questions to share, comments to make. We'd like to know what you think about that. Well, we've been speaking about shrinking civic space. At least that's what we started out with when we started the conversation, but we've learned so much from each other, and it's been a fantastic conversation this very evening. The two wonderful people you've listened to, Oyebisi Babatunde Oluseyi, Executive Director of the Nigerian Network of NGOs with a rich background in civil society strengthening, including his good work and great work at UNICEF New York, where he initiated Rural Voices of Youth Initiative. And yes, he's one of the biggest people that you would find on Google delivering a masterclass on non-profit management masterclass for Google at some point in time. Tsema Yvonne Ede is a lawyer, expertise in communications, policy, gender, grant making, and fund management, with 19 years of experience working both with funders, organizers, and of course, non-profits as well. She has provided excellent good work, if I would say, providing both legal understanding of what there is to achieve. She did start of much of our professional life after leaving University of Oxford as a lawyer. And yes, I like to say it like that now. Yeah, I like to say it like that. If I start to read that fellowship here, you know that when she says fellowship, she's not talking about Muslim or Christian fellowship.
Or the shrine.
Or the shrine fellowship. Let's include that in. But a big thanks to both of you for coming on this very lovely day on Matters That Matter. I'm so super grateful. Remember, this conversation is brought to you by HBS in partnership with Fire Radio Co Studio. Yes, you can watch more of this kind of conversations on YouTube, okay? You find that at the Volume Pod, okay? That's where you find much of this conversation. And yes, HBS definitely works with activists, thinkers, and people who are going to make a difference, especially along the lines of public debate as we would have it. Many thanks to you and for all you do. I'm Femi D. I'm grateful that you have listened through to this conversation.